I'm Sergeant Robert Horton, United States Army Special Operations. I was a psychological operations specialist from 1999 to 2012, and I'm also a son of the American Revolution. Now, everyone is wondering about this Russell J. Gould and David Wynn Miller story, and everybody wants to know what in the world is going on with that. What does it mean, right? Okay, but to understand what it means, you have to understand what's going on planet Earth that you all need to be made aware of so you can understand what it is these guys are talking about, okay? So I'm going to go back to the beginning. This is a very old Masonic system that's operating here on planet Earth, and it is all based upon shipping and postal wars that have morphed into banking wars. Okay, so the three really work together hand in hand, but the banking warfare has really kicked off here as of late in relation to this whole thing. So when you're born here on this planet, or here on this planet, you are born of the water, right? Because this is a shipping war. You're all captured in a shipping warfare that you're unaware of, that you've been captured into. So when you're born of your mother's water. And you are docked as a vessel by a doctor, who is a registered harbor master by the port authorities and authorized by the Department of Transportation. And when you are docked by the doctor, you are then harbored in the harbor in a vessel in dry dock known as a hospital, which is considered to be a boat parked on the land. Okay? But when you're born and harbored by the harbor master in this vessel in dry dock, you are considered a ward of the state. So you are placed into a maternity ward. Why are you a ward of the state? Because you have not yet been brought under the laws of this old school Masonic system. Now, how they get you into this old school Masonic system is with the birth certificate. So you're considered a ward of the state or an outlaw because you're not yet under the laws of the old Masonic system until your mother signs the birth certificate. This is a commercial instrument, okay? This is saying that you are now owned and under the laws of this Masonic system, but you are owned and that you are nothing more than a piece of cargo or a vessel or a dead person that's presumed to be missing, dead, or lost at sea, right? Once you're legged into this massive corporate construct, and it's a global construct, you are then subject to the laws of the state. State of affairs, not state of California or state of Nevada. We're talking global state of affairs. You're legged into the state.
It's in favor of the banks. It's certainly not in favor of the people. What happens when you have a child is your child is given a social security number. They estimate how many taxes your child is going to pay over his or her lifetime. And they take that birth certificate and they issue it on the capital markets and they earn money on it.
Once that happens, you are then under the laws of this entire global construct.
I'm saying something much worse, actually. What I'm saying is that when every citizen goes into the court system, they are not seen there as themselves a U.S. citizen. They're seen as the person who had their birth certificate pledged. You're there as a debtor. You're not there as a citizen. We have been converted from human beings that are citizens of the Republic of the United States into chattel. Chattel, that is a legal term for something which is property. We are now considered to be property of the Federal Reserve. We're not considered to be human beings and citizens of the United States.
These are the pillars of the laws of this global construct. Admiralty and maritime, and civil jurisdiction. Law of the sea, law of the land. Law of the sea has always been held by the King of Great Britain. Okay, that's how he runs his entire country. It's considered a vessel, a great big boat, and all the people in that boat are considered to be missing, dead, or presumed lost at sea with their birth certificate system. That's how he runs his whole country. And that's the same thing we're doing here in the United States. Why? Because Great Britain has always been our postmaster general here in the colonies and the 50 states. Now let me explain what Postmaster General of the world is. Okay, this is our vessel. This is planet Earth. This is the vessel that we're all floating around on in this sea of space we call the solar system or the galaxy. This is our outpost, right? Our boat. The Postmaster General, or the General of the Post, is Great Britain. Always has been. This is an old school Masonic warfare platform, planetary warfare platform based upon shipping, postal, and banking wars. Okay, I've explained the shipping to you. The postal revolves around timelines. When you're brought into a jail, the timelines kick off, whether it's a federal offense, state offense, or local offense. Different venues have different timelines, okay, and there's several. His whole system is enforced in the courts around the world. This whole system is enforced in the courts, and what they're enforcing is the elemental chart, his strategic metals contract, his styles manual, and the dictionary, which is basically the entire system all of us are using, the grammatical construct we all use. All of these contracts and this entire system is enforced in the courts around the world. Those are called the neutral ports. That's where the wars are fought in relation to this entire matter, right? If you got a grievance, you go into the courts or the neutral ports and you fight it out. But this thing is set up to make sure that he always wins, okay? This entire system is set up so that you never win. All they look at you as is a piece of cargo, a boat or a vessel that can be harvested, raped, plundered, and pillaged for its goods. So this is the old school Masonic system that these guys have set up, and this is what is being defended on planet Earth, okay? This whole system belongs to the King of Great Britain, or is run and defended by the King of Great Britain. Okay, so he is the Postmaster General of the world. All of the countries on planet Earth are utilizing and playing with this system. Okay, doesn't matter if you're in Russia, China, or Germany. If you get married here in the United States, you're still considered to be married in Russia, China, or Germany. If you get divorced, you're considered divorced all over the world, right? Because the courts are all connected. Everybody's playing this game. It's a big, old school Masonic system that they utilize to control the people and run the planet with. This is the old school monarchical system that commands and controls the entire planet, or at least is attempting to. All of the countries on planet Earth are utilizing this Masonic warfare platform, okay? And as they are all high-ranking Masons, all of them, okay? Not Masons in the form of guys who are setting up sidewalks and driveways, okay? They're not those type of Masons. These Masons build governments. They build them and they defend them. The contracts that I pointed out that the King of Great Britain has, all the countries have those same contracts. They all have their own strategic metals contract in place that allows them to print and mint their own coinage based upon their banking system, okay? Everybody has commodities that they trade around the world with each other, and that's what those banking systems are based upon. Oil being one of the biggest. And the King of Great Britain is the reigning monarch on the planet. That's why he is the Postmaster General of the world. What we're going to look at is where the crown derives its authorizations or its authorities that their entire system is based upon. Okay, real quick, let's go back and recover some American history, okay? Back when the colonies were founded, there was 13 colonies originally. And before the American Revolution broke out, our post office was the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania post office, the Benjamin Franklin post office, okay, or postal court, which is here. And once the American Revolution had broke out, the king had cut off our ability to conduct international trade and commerce out of that post office because we went to war against Great Britain, right? So the war, all wars vacate that kind of contract. So our shipping was cut off. After the American Revolution, we couldn't open commerce back up through this post office because we owed 1.6 million francs to the French for funding the American Revolution. So at that point, the King of Spain and the King of France argued over who was going to be the Postmaster General here in the United States to open it up to international trade and commerce. Right? Spain said that they had found America first. Christopher Columbus had discovered the New World first, and so they had rights to it. France said that without loaning America the 1.6 million francs, the United States wouldn't even be open for capture. But the King of Great Britain, still being the reigning monarch in the world, said those are my people, and I'm going to put my post office in up there and open this thing up to trade and commerce. You guys need to stand down. So that's how he became the Postmaster General of the United States. And the Canada location has always been attached to that postal location as well. So the King of Great Britain took tactical command and control of the entire North American continent in the process. So if the other reigning monarchs and dictators of the world wanted to come into our country, or the United States, and rape and pillage it for its natural resources and its goods, they'd have to go through him and his post office to do so. So everything that was shipped in and out of the country, all trade and commerce, he got a piece of through that post office. Just like he did down in the East Indies. He is taking tactical command and control of the movement and shipment of all goods on planet Earth. That's his end goal. Okay, now there was a long-range objective that had been placed into motion here by the Crown, the Vatican, and London City and the Rothschilds. Okay, and the reason the American Revolution had kicked off was because the United States wanted to float its currency into the global market, and because they based their monetary system on the value of the land, it never fluctuates. It's a solid base, right? But the Rothschilds fluctuate gold and silver up and down in relation to what they have going on. And because our currency doesn't fluctuate, when these guys would drop the price of gold down, America could buy it up and eventually would become the global power on the planet. So the Rothschilds attacked the Crown, and the Crown said, you guys can't do that, and as a matter of fact, this is war against me, and I'm not going to let that happen. So that was the reason for the American Revolution. But the long-range objective was to get the United States to borrow money from these guys in an effort to surrender them back to Great Britain. And how that was going to work was you only get 3 chances to pay off the debt that you borrow from these guys. And if you can't pay it off, then the Crown will step in, pay the debt to these guys off for you, and then capture you back as part of his system or part of Great Britain. And you'd all become peasants and serfs again. And this entire thing revolved around the year 1999. This is an event horizon year, not just for the United States, but for the entire planet. Okay, so when the colonies had come out of the American Revolution and the king stepped in as Postmaster General for the United States, the U.S. Constitution was drafted. Okay, and the U.S. Constitution outlined how the king's government was going to interact with the colonies in relation to international trade and commerce. Okay, and this thing was seen by Patrick Henry and the colonials as so tyrannical that they created the Bill of Rights, outlining, or I should say, laying out what it was that the King of Great Britain and that federal government, the Fed, would never have the power to infringe upon, because they knew that this king was so tyrannical, eventually he would enforce his authority into the states' territories and try to tell you what you could and couldn't say, what you could and couldn't write, right? The freedom of the press, that you couldn't bear arms, you wouldn't have the right to defend your country. So those things were all outlined here in the Bill of Rights, and those are the things the king would never have the power to infringe upon, ever. It was done. It was the only thing that ratified the U.S. Constitution. And they were not going to sign it. The colonials refused to sign it until these guys, the Fed, accepted this outline. The reason that 1999 is an event horizon year is because in 1999 was the end of the third and final international bankruptcy for the United States. And we were going to be surrendered back over to Great Britain because we couldn't afford to pay the debt to London and the Rothschilds and the 13 banking families off. But that meant that the U.S. Constitution had come to an end. It was over. It was the end of the third and final international bankruptcy, and the contract between us and Great Britain expired.
And then they incorporated the United States as a company. And they made the President of the United States the chief executive officer. And they made the representatives of Congress managers. And so when people come to Congress, they're taught very quickly that their constituents are not what it's all about. What it's all about is for them to get on the dole of the federal government, which is there to enslave the people who live in the United States. That's what that is.
So what does that mean the U.S. Constitution had come to an end? Well, it was the end of the third and final international bankruptcy for the United States. And with the end of the third and final international bankruptcy, the King of Great Britain had to vacate the position as Postmaster General due to international banking law. And the trustee between us and Great Britain, or the bankruptcy, has always been the President of the United States. Well, if there's no more bankruptcy, then there's no more need for a trustee. The agreement with us and Great Britain is over. So, no bankruptcy, no trustee.
The federal government, which is there to enslave the people who live in the United States. That's what that is.
So what does that mean the U.S. Constitution had come to an end? Well, it was the end of the third and final international bankruptcy for the United States. And with the end of the third and final international bankruptcy, the King of Great Britain had to vacate the position as Postmaster General due to international banking law. And the trustee between us and Great Britain, or the bankruptcy, has always been the President of the United States. Well, if there's no more bankruptcy, then there's no more need for a trustee. The agreement with us and Great Britain is over. So, no bankruptcy, no trustee. So in 1999, there should not have been a presidential election held. The U.S. Congress should have been shut down, the Senate should have been shut down, everybody should have been fired, and we should have held a new constitutional convention and resubstantiated the entire government from the ground up. And they never told the American people about any of it. Now, with the end of the American Revolution, the United States didn't have a strategic metals contract in place. Okay, we weren't allowed to print and mint our own coinage, so we had to borrow it from these guys, from the Rothschilds and London City, authorized by the Crown, because the Crown has a strategic metals contract in place, and that's what we've been utilizing. In 1933, with the Great Depression, actually 1929, is when the beginning of the third and final international bankruptcy had started, or the end of the second had come to an end. Because we were borrowing money from these guys over here, we're now in usury with this system. Okay, so that is how we're captured in usury with these guys over here. We're using their money. We're not allowed to make or create our own. And as a matter of fact, we're borrowing it and paying it back with interest in hard, natural assets. Okay, all of this is going somewhere, okay? This is all going back. Their objective was to set up the largest drug and money laundering system the world had ever seen. And it was called Operation Studebaker and Operation Clean Broom, which was the money laundering systems into the operation. And that was ran out of Kentucky by Marion Horn. A gentleman named Marion Horn. The main objective of this operation was to create money for the CIA so they wouldn't have to go and ask Congress for money. Doing so might divulge plans the CIA had going on. So they developed the largest drug and money laundering system the world has ever seen. The objective of which was to set up a drug running operation and then put all the money into a conglomeration of banks set up by the Rothschilds and the 13 banking families known as the Five Star Trust. That is Lucifer's Sustainable Development Fund. Okay, that's Lucifer's piggy bank. I'm just going to say it. So, once this all got set up, Kennedy came into office. And Kennedy warned us of a massive conspiracy that scared him so bad, he created U.S. Special Forces.
The very word secrecy is repugnant